on, guys? Welcome to episode 6, Chem Vlog. Today we're talking about balance. The definition for chemical equilibrium is when the rate of the forward reaction is equal to the rate of the reverse reaction. That's when we're in balance. There's certain conditions that are necessary for equilibrium to happen. You gotta have a closed container. If the products get out, they can't re-react to form the reactants. Now, sometimes when you have a chemical reaction, you want to shift the equilibrium to make it more balanced, or maybe shift it to create more products. Okay, whatever you want to do. We can affect this. We can add 3 things. We can add temperature, we can add pressure, or we can add more of the reactants or products. I like to think about this kind of like real life, in real life balance. We can add things to our life to help us either regain balance or shift our balance a certain way. So for me, to help myself in my own balance in my life, there are 3 things I can think of. The first one, first thing that comes to mind right here is playing my guitar. For some reason, whenever I play guitar, it just calms me down and brings me back to that state of balance when I'm stressed. So when I'm adding this to my routine, it can help me reestablish my own equilibrium. Reestablishing equilibrium. There are 2 other things that I can think of that help me establish equilibrium in my life. One of those things is running. I don't really know when I got into it. I think I was in college. But running for me, this is a really great way to focus. It's when I think of a lot of my creative ideas. Gets the endorphins going. And it's a great way to compete against yourself. But again, it's a really great way for me to rebalance my life. Woo! Last but not least, I walk my dog. Adding dog walking to my routine every morning has really helped me establish equilibrium or balance because I get to wake up and have something to look forward to start my day off. And it's not that I didn't have that before, but something like dog walking, where it's active, gets you outside, it's just a great way to start the day. So, like I just explained, there are things we can add to help our lives gain more balance. I had 3 examples, just like there's 3 examples of things you can add in chemistry for chemical equilibrium. So how does that work? Let's talk about that for a minute. Right now, for the most part, this stick is balancing on my finger in equilibrium. It's perfectly balanced. It's not going to the right or the left. Now, if I put a rock or something heavier on one side, aka adding to this side, notice how it's gonna shift. But in order to counteract that shift, it would need to have something of equal weight added to the opposite side. So, it's balanced. If I add to this side, then equilibrium is gonna shift to the opposite side to balance it out. I need to add a second rock to balance out that first rock. Chemistry is the same way. In a chemical equilibrium system, if you add more reactants, the reaction is gonna shift to the right-hand side. If you add more products, which you can do, you will see a shift to the reactants side. Let's talk about pressure. So, pressure. What's the deal with pressure? Wait. Actually, hang on one second. There we go. You know, got to do a little outfit change. You know, got to look fresh. So, this is a sealed can of Red Bull. I don't drink Red Bull very much because I don't need Red Bull. But to illustrate this idea of pressure, it's sealed. Like I was talking about earlier about equilibrium, right? You can't have equilibrium unless the container is sealed, because the products then can bounce around and react to form reactants in the reverse direction. But with pressure, this is the best example that I could find in my house. It's a good example of showing how changing the size or changing the orientation of the container can affect the pressure. If I open the can, obviously there was a rapid release of pressure. what's being released is CO2 gas. And that would be in this reaction that's occurring inside. That's a lot of the product that's escaping, which is gonna affect the equilibrium. The way that equilibrium works with pressure, I think of this like a crowded room. Okay, if it's a crowded room and you're hanging out with a group of friends, you tend to shift towards the area that's least crowded, the area with the most space. This is kind of like what happens with pressure when it comes to equilibrium. When you expand the container, there's more room for the molecules to move. So what's gonna happen to the equilibrium is that it will shift to the side with the most moles, or the most molecules, because there's enough space for more molecules to be produced. There's more space for them to bounce around and react. The reverse is true as well. If you compress the container, if you add pressure, you can shift the equilibrium as well, and in that case, it'll shift to the side with the least moles. Cheers. Last but not least, temperature. So, what do you do when you are cold? You bundle up is what you do. You try to get warmer. The reactions are gonna do the same thing. In a chemical reaction, there is heat either absorbed or released. So you can think of heat like a product or a reactant. So if the reaction is cold or cooled down, it's gonna shift to the side that makes the heat, so it can warm back up. And in the same way, if you're hot, like right now, because it is in the 80s today, you would normally shed a layer to cool off. The reaction with the same thing, this same process in its own way. If it gets hot, if it is heated up, it's going to shift to the side that's colder or that is not producing heat to cool itself off. So to sum up, we can add things to our life to regain balance and equilibrium. Just like we can add temperature, pressure, and concentration to change and adjust the equilibrium of a chemical reaction. In the same way, we can also take away temperature, pressure, and concentration in chemical equilibrium to shift equilibrium and regain balance. Just like in our own lives, we can take certain things away that might affect our balance too, like maybe trying to limit your screen time, trying to limit the amount of bad junk food you eat, Red Bulls, trying to limit toxic relationships or cut those out of your life. Whatever the case may be, we can do the same process of regaining our own balance by removing things in our lives too. And so I like to think about equilibrium in this real life context. It really helps me understand the chemistry of it. So for chemistry, we got adding and taking away temperature, pressure, and concentration. In my own life, I add things like my dog walking routine in the morning, going on a run from time to time, playing guitar from time to time, okay? Removing things like bad food from my diet or removing things like screen time from my daily routine as much as I can. That's something I gotta work on, to be honest. That's something that is a challenge for me, being completely transparent. So, especially in this time. So, these are things I think about for my own life and my own life balance, and it's a way to frame this idea of chemical equilibrium. So, to sum up, chemical equilibrium is when the rates of forward and reverse reactions are equal, and we can affect equilibrium by changing pressure, temperature, and the concentration of the reactants of the products. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this. If you like this video, subscribe, drop a comment. How do you stay balanced in your own life? Check me out on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok at MrP_chemistry for more funny videos, tips, tutorials, etc. I hope you enjoyed this little tutorial. I hope to see you guys soon.